Welcome to the Money Runner. I'm David Nelson, your host. It is Thursday, 1 p.m. in the afternoon. The market's just closed. Shortened trading day. Why? Because we have, of course, the 4th of July tomorrow. I guess the New York Stock Exchange want to give everybody a chance to get home to family. I've only got a couple of things I want to cover before I go home to my family. But it was an important week, very powerful week. Virtually every sector was in the green this week. Materials up the most, and that's kind of unusual. When I look year to date, I look at the top performing sector, industrials, very cyclical industry, so that the economy can't be that bad. But this week was all about the BBB, the big beautiful bill. Is that going to pass? And it's starting to look like it will. I'm going to get to that in a second. But the number of the day was, of course, the jobs number. Normally comes on a Friday. Today it came on a Thursday. 147,000. A lot better than what consensus was at 110. The unemployment rate dropped to 4.1%, down from 4.2. Average hourly earnings, more good news, 0.2% month over month. Consensus was at 0.3. So that's, disinflationary. Initial jobless claims, 233,000. That was below consensus at 241. Again, all in, good news for the economy and jobs. There's some cracks in here, but the one thing that is for certain, a July rate cut, out of the question. And that was starting to get factored in. Just 2 days ago, if I looked at Fed Fund futures, you can see it on your screen. July was starting to come into picture here. September looked almost like a lock. And here we are today. Here's the new chart. July's off the table. September's a maybe at this point. So you're seeing a lot of analysts, economists, strategists start to rein in their expectations on the Fed. And that was really a big part of the powerful rally that we've had over the last couple of weeks, in part because rates have come in. Rates were up today, and yet the market still went higher. Good news was good news. And when I look at the market and I look at some of the repair that we've seen, think back to where we were in April. The thinking back then was tariffs are going to be around 25%, pretty draconian. You'd have to slash earnings expectations for all your favorite companies. Now, what I think markets have figured out early on was that all in, tariffs were probably going to represent about 10%. What does that mean? Well, at 10%, that brings in about $300 billion annually to Treasury, some income there. It's not so high that it would force a company to maybe shift their supply chains or manufacturing footprint. They'll stay where they are. They can save some money that way. The consumer, they'll pay some higher prices, but I don't think the consumer is going to bear the brunt of this. I think it's going to be a split. I think consumers will pay a little bit higher prices. I think companies will choose to eat some of the costs themselves, sacrifice some margins because they don't want to risk losing market share. So all in, a workable picture. Like I said, BBB, the big beautiful bill, it's looking like it's going to make its way to the president's desk. I think he'd like to sign it tomorrow. But given how close it is, I'd have to say anything can happen. Until it is signed, sealed, and delivered, it is not a lock. You've heard me on this podcast say there's a lot of things in this bill that I embrace. There are some things I do not embrace. The tax cut extension, that's an absolute. Have to have that. I don't think really anybody wants to go back to where we were, and that's what would happen. Remember, a tax cut works for people who pay taxes. So a lot of the benefit of this will go to people who are paying federal income tax. I think some of the rhetoric regarding cuts in Medicaid are not well-founded. Most of the cuts in Medicaid are for people who should not be receiving Medicaid in the first place. Able-bodied adults shouldn't be receiving Medicaid. Illegal immigrants, while it might be a nice thing to do, I don't think we can afford it as a nation. So I think there's a fair amount of hysteria on this. But like I said, this looks like it's going to make its way to the president's desk, but almost anything could happen. There was other news this week as well. Trump says he's got a trade deal with Vietnam done. And at least on the surface, from what I can see, it does look quite good. It looks like the deal is very favorable to the United States. When you dig it down inside, when you dig deep inside, you can see that this looks like a way to close off any way China could channel their goods through Vietnam to avoid higher tariffs. And I think this is going to be a template for a lot of deals with Asian nations where that might be part of the play for China to try to get their goods to the United States and get around the tariff barriers. They certainly tried to do that with Mexico. Finally, let's talk about earnings. Look at this graph right now. You can see the S&P 500 breaking to an all-time high. That's great news, of course. But what I also like on that is that green line that looks like it's back on I-95 North. Starting to roll over in April as we're starting to slash numbers because of some of the draconian tariff measures that we thought were out there. But right now we're back up there. It looks like we're going to do about $280 on a blended basis, looking 6 months forward, six months backwards. Next week, not a lot of data. On the earnings front, a little bit. Delta, Progressive reporting next week. The earnings season really kicks off the following week when we get the big banks, but that's not really till the middle of the month. And this is when the rubber hits the road. We're going to see if this massive surge that we've seen in the last few months is justified when we see the headline prints and we hear what CEOs have to say. All right. I'm going to cut it short. I want to get home to my family. I'm sure you want to get to your family. Wanted to give you a few tidbits to think about over the weekend. I'll be back with you in full next week. Don't forget, I'm going to be on Charles Payne's show, Making Money, on Monday, sometime between 2 and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, have a wonderful holiday weekend. I'm David Nelson, and this is The Money Runner.